Part 1. When life feels like it's slipping away. Maybe it isn't just chance that you clicked on this video. Maybe it appeared at the exact moment you've been quietly carrying too much. A moment when you're exhausted but can't quite name why. When the things you once believed in, your dreams, your plans, even your sense of identity, suddenly feel fragile, as though they could collapse with a single breath. It happens to everyone sooner or later. You look in the mirror and the face looking back doesn't feel like your own anymore. You wonder, how did I get here? Why do I feel so far away from myself? That's often the moment Stoic philosophy begins to whisper to us. Now, Stoicism doesn't offer comfort the way most self-help does. It won't tell you that life is supposed to be easy, or that everything happens for a reason. It doesn't wrap the chaos of the world in sugar and hand it back to you with a smile. Instead, it gives you something infinitely more valuable. The ability to stand unshaken, no matter how violent the storm becomes. It teaches you to let go of the things you were never meant to control, to stop burning energy on outcomes that aren't in your hands. It shows you how to master the one battlefield that truly matters, your own mind. And it asks you to act with patience and discipline, even in those moments when no one sees your effort and no reward seems close. This video is not here to sell you hope. It's here to remind you of something you may have forgotten, that the strength you think you've lost has never left. It's still within you, waiting quietly, like an ember glowing beneath ash. No matter how loud the chaos gets outside, that ember is still alive. And if you're watching this right now, maybe it's because something inside you is ready to fan it back into flame. So let's begin. Lesson 1. Release what you cannot control. The Stoics believed that the key to peace is understanding a simple but life-changing truth. There are things within your control, and there are things outside it. Wisdom doesn't come from trying to bend the world into submission. Wisdom comes from knowing the difference. Think about it. Imagine you're pushing on a door with all your strength. Sweat on your brow, muscles straining. But above your head, in big bold letters, it says pull. The harder you push, the more the door resists. You grow frustrated, angry, maybe even ashamed. But the truth is, the problem isn't your effort. It's your refusal to notice what's within your power and what isn't. That's how many of us live every single day. The more we try to change what is fundamentally outside our control, the more powerless we feel. Then comes the blame. We blame ourselves for not being good enough. We blame life for being unfair. And in that cycle of blame, we lose ourselves. Picture a mother in a hospital corridor, waiting for news about her child. The doctor hasn't come out yet. Hours feel like days. Her hands are clasped so tightly in prayer her knuckles ache. She hasn't eaten. She hasn't slept. Her body is trembling under the weight of helplessness. And she believes, with all her heart, that worrying is her duty, as if her fear is a kind of offering that will protect her child. But the truth is, in that moment she can do nothing. And that is where the lesson lies. Letting go does not mean giving up. It does not mean you love less or care less. It means you recognize that this moment asks not for action, but for presence. To stay, to breathe, to feel every beat of pain without trying to run from it. That is strength, not weakness. The trap of outcomes. Maybe you've felt this in a smaller way. Waiting for a reply to a text that never comes. One unread notification that consumes your whole day. Your heart races at the sound of a ping. Your stomach drops when silence follows. You tell yourself you'll feel better once they reply. But until then you're restless, anxious, and drained. Stop and ask yourself, if I can't control the outcome, why am I letting it control me? This is where Stoicism draws a sharp line. You are free the moment you refuse to let external events hijack your inner calm. But here's the catch, the more tightly you cling to outcomes, the more you strangle your own peace. You tell yourself, I'll be happy when I'm promoted, when I'm understood, when I'm chosen, when I'm the best. But happiness doesn't live at the end of conditions, because life doesn't obey the script in your head. Real happiness is not found in what happens to you. It's found in how you meet whatever happens. The beauty of letting go. Picture an elderly man sitting at a wooden table, a cup of tea cradled in his hands. Sunlight pours through the window, illuminating the quiet lines of his face. This is a man who has lived through war, betrayal, heartbreak, and loss. And yet, he smiles not because his life was easy, but because he finally stopped bracing against fate. That is the beauty of letting go. It isn't surrender. It's understanding. You stop fighting a game that was never yours to win. I once had a friend who lost nearly everything in bankruptcy. For months, his only thought was how to get it all back. He obsessed over every dollar, every failed deal, every opportunity lost. Until one evening, worn down, he asked himself a single question. If I never recover what I lost, can I still live well? The answer didn't come right away, but over time he began teaching again, sharing his hard-won lessons with young people. Slowly, he realized he had not lost his ability to live, only his illusion of control. And in that moment of surrender, he began to live more fully than he had in years, practicing the art of letting go. But don't wait for a collapse before you learn this art. Practice with the small things. Forget your umbrella and get caught in the rain. Instead of cursing, slow down and feel the droplets soak your skin. Let them remind you that the world doesn't move on your terms. When someone at work misunderstands you, instead of burning with frustration, ask yourself, do I really need them to understand me right now? Letting go is not a single act. It's a life skill. Like a muscle, it grows through small, daily repetitions. Try this exercise. Each morning, ask yourself, what am I trying to control today that I don't actually need to? Then release just one thing. Just one. You may be surprised to find you've lost nothing and gained peace instead. The quiet truth. Here's the paradox. The more you release, the more life gives back. The right people, the right opportunities, the right answers often arrive not when you chase them desperately, but when you've stopped grasping. Perhaps even this video reached you in that way. Not because you were hunting for it, but because you were ready to hear it. And once you've learned to breathe and release, a new question emerges. If I no longer need to control everything, then where am I rushing to? That is where the next lesson begins. Not racing against the world, but learning how to walk with it. Not about speed, but about direction. And in that shift, you may discover what real freedom feels like. Part 2. You're not in a race with the world. From the moment we are old enough to understand praise, the race begins. High grades earn applause. College acceptance earns pride. A job at a prestigious company earns admiration. Promotions, marriage, children, a home, a car, all lined up like checkpoints in a marathon we never chose to run. And slowly, almost without noticing, life stops being life. It becomes a scoreboard. We measure our worth by how many steps ahead or behind we are compared to others. And when you fall behind, when you don't have what someone your age should have, you start to feel invisible, worthless, or even broken. But here's the truth Stoic philosophy whispers. A life worth living isn't measured by speed, but by depth. The escalator that never ends. Think about the world we live in today. It's like stepping onto an escalator that never stops moving. If you pause to rest, you feel as though you're being dragged backward. If you move too slowly, you're falling behind. That's the illusion modern life sells us. Stop and you're outdated. Stop and you lose your worth. Stop and everyone else overtakes you. A friend of mine once worked in advertising, one of those high-pressure industries where ideas are currency. He told me he woke up every morning feeling like there was an invisible gun pressed to his back. Nobody said it out loud, but the message was clear. Keep producing, keep innovating, or risk being left behind. The deadlines weren't the true enemy. It was the fear of not keeping pace. And fear is a cruel motivator. It drives you harder and harder, but you never actually arrive. You're running, yes, but on a hamster wheel, spinning in place. Living for applause. This is the trap. When we live to prove ourselves to others, we stop living for ourselves. I once met a young woman at an airport lounge. She had just quit her job after 5 grueling years. I asked why. She didn't say she hated the work itself. Instead, she said something that struck me deeply. It wasn't the hours. It wasn't the workload. It was waking up every day feeling like I was in a race no one asked me to run. My coworkers were getting promoted, my classmates were buying houses, my friends were getting married. And every morning I'd compare my life to theirs and wonder why I wasn't enough. That was more exhausting than the job itself. Her life, by any measure, was fine. But she couldn't see it because her internal scoreboard always told her she was behind. And isn't that what happens to so many of us? The race ends when you step off. The Stoics taught that peace doesn't come from having more. It comes from knowing what is enough. The race ends the moment you dare to step off the track. Not because you've given up, but because you've finally asked the question most people are too afraid to face. What am I actually chasing? You'd be amazed how many people spend their entire lives hitting goals that were never really theirs. Living out the expectations of parents, teachers, friends, or society. They wake up one day in a beautiful home beside the person they thought they wanted, working the job they once dreamed of, and feel strangely hollow. They built the life they thought would satisfy them, only to realize they don't belong in it. So what then? Pausing without quitting. Let's be clear. This isn't about throwing away your responsibilities, quitting your job, or retreating to live in the woods. Stoicism doesn't demand withdrawal from life. It asks for clarity within it. That means you can still strive, still work, still dream, but not in blind competition. Not because you're desperate to prove yourself. You move with intention, not compulsion. Here's how it looks in practice. When you're at work, don't just grind through the day chasing the next KPI. Pause and ask, does this actually matter to me? Or am I just chasing someone else's definition of success? When you scroll through social media and see someone ahead of you, a classmate who bought a house, a colleague who started a company, an ex who got engaged, ask yourself, do I really want what they have, or do I just crave the validation that comes with it? Wisdom from the park. An older neighbor of mine walks around the park every single morning. No headphones, no phone, no multitasking. Just him, the trees, and the rhythm of his own footsteps. One day, curious, I asked him why he didn't at least listen to music or a podcast. Wouldn't that make the walk more productive? He smiled and said something I didn't fully understand until much later. Busy is how the world makes you forget you're alive. At the time, I brushed it off. But over the years, I realized he was right. We've been conditioned to equate busyness with worth. To always fill the silence. To always be moving forward. But in the quiet, we remember that simply being is enough. Walking with intention. This is what Stoicism teaches. Not to run faster, but to walk more deliberately. To stop letting comparison dictate your pace. To choose depth over speed. You can still build your career. You can still love deeply. You can still pursue goals. But the difference is you're no longer running to prove something. You're walking because you know where you're going, and you're unafraid to go at your own pace. And once you begin to walk this way, you'll realize something remarkable. The world doesn't punish you for stepping off the racetrack. Most of the pressure was never real. It only lived in your mind. A question for you. So let me ask you directly. Do you feel like you're in a nameless race right now? Have you ever paused long enough to ask yourself, what would really happen if I just stopped? The answer might surprise you. Most of the time, nothing happens. You don't collapse. You don't disappear. You don't lose yourself. Instead, you gain a quiet moment of clarity. A space to breathe, to see what actually matters to you. And sometimes, that silence is the most important thing in the world. A reminder for the exhausted. If you're watching this video at a moment when you feel drained, overextended, and bone-tired, it's not a coincidence. Maybe it found you right when you were about to give in to the pressure of the race. This is your reminder. You don't have to keep sprinting. You don't have to keep proving. You don't have to keep pace with everyone else. Life isn't asking you to win. It's asking you to show up with presence, with honesty, with courage to choose your own rhythm. So if this speaks to you, pause. Breathe. Share this with someone else who is running too fast to notice the life passing them by. They might need the same reminder. Because in the end, the only finish line that matters is the one that feels like yours. The next step. And once you slow down enough to step off the race, another truth begins to surface. The sense of not enough that drove you, the constant striving, the fear of being left behind. That wasn't really you. It was the voice of your ego. But the ego isn't the real you. It's just the mask you've been wearing. And that is where our next lesson begins. Part 3. The ego isn't the real you. Once you step off the endless race, something strange happens. First, there's silence. Then, slowly, another voice emerges. It whispers questions you've avoided. Who am I when I'm not chasing? Who am I without the scoreboard? That voice isn't your soul. It isn't your deepest self. It's your ego. And the truth the Stoics knew is this: the ego is not you. The mask we wear. The ego is a mask you've been carrying since childhood. At first, it protected you. When you were young, you learned that if you smiled, if you impressed, if you achieved, you were rewarded. Love, approval, safety. So you built a persona, your best self. Confident, smart, capable, worthy. But over time, the mask became heavy. You stopped knowing where it ended and where you began. The mask said, you are your job. You are your reputation. You are your followers, your wealth, your applause. And without realizing it, you forgot the quiet truth beneath the mask. You are not any of those things. The hungry phantom. The ego is never satisfied. No matter how much you feed it, it always whispers, more, more, more. It's like pouring water into a cracked jar. No matter how much you fill, it always leaks empty. Seneca once wrote that, it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. And that's exactly what the ego does. Keeps you poor not in money, but in peace. It convinces you that happiness is always just one step away. One more promotion. One more purchase. One more compliment. But every time you reach it, the horizon moves. A modern example. Think about social media. Every post, every photo, every video is curated to feed the ego. You show the best angle, the highlight reel, the version of yourself you want the world to admire. But then comes the waiting. How many likes? How many shares? How many comments? Suddenly, your worth feels like it lives inside a number on a glowing screen. And when the number isn't high enough, the ego panics. Do I matter? Am I enough? But here's the cruel trick. Even when the number is high, it doesn't last. The hunger returns. The ego is never full. The story of the emperor. There's a story about Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history. He commanded armies, ruled an empire, and held the loyalty of millions. By all measures, his ego had every reason to believe he was godlike. And yet, every morning he reminded himself, you could die today. You are just a man, dust and bone. He wrote these reminders not for humility alone, but for survival. He knew that if he allowed the mask of emperor to define him, he would lose himself completely. Marcus understood. The ego may sit on the throne, but it is never the king. When the mask cracks. So what happens when the ego fails you? When you lose the job, when the relationship ends, when your health falters, when the applause stops. If your identity is built on the mask, the fall feels like death. Because in a sense, it is the death of the self you pretended to be. I once knew a man who spent decades climbing the corporate ladder. His entire worth lived in his title and his corner office. Then one day, his company downsized. Just like that, it was gone. He told me later, it wasn't just the job I lost. It was me. I didn't know who I was without it. That's the danger of the ego. When it cracks, you realize it was never truly you. The Stoic shift. So how do the Stoics deal with the ego? They don't try to destroy it. They see through it. They remember that identity built on externals, titles, wealth, fame, even praise, is fragile. But identity built on virtue, on character, wisdom, courage, cannot be taken away. Epictetus, who was born a slave, put it perfectly. You may chain my leg, but not even Zeus can chain my will. That is the self that survives. That is the self that cannot be broken. A small exercise. Try this with me for a moment. Close your eyes and strip away the masks one by one. Not your name, not your job, not your possessions, not your status, not your achievements. Take them all off. What's left? That silent observer. That spark of awareness behind the roles. That's you. The part that has always been there. The part that doesn't vanish when circumstances change. The ego fears silence because silence exposes its illusion. Why this matters? If you live only as your ego, life will feel like an endless performance. You'll always be adjusting the mask, terrified it might slip. But once you see that the mask is not you, you are free. Free to fail without losing yourself. Free to succeed without becoming arrogant. Free to walk your own path without needing applause. Because the applause was never the point. The point is to live in harmony with yourself. A bridge to the next lesson. And when you stop living for the ego, something else happens. You start to see life differently. Instead of obsessing over what you don't have, you begin to notice what you do. And suddenly, gratitude, simple, radical gratitude, becomes your greatest form of strength. That's where we'll go next. Part 4. Gratitude as armor. Once the mask of ego falls away, life feels quieter. But it can also feel raw, even frightening. Without the shield of I am my status or I am my possessions, you're suddenly exposed. And that's exactly when the Stoics reach for a different kind of shield. Gratitude, the misunderstood power. Gratitude today has been watered down into something soft, like whispering thank yous before bed, or jotting 3 nice things in a journal. But to the Stoics, gratitude was not sentimental. It was armor, a daily practice of shifting attention from what's missing to what's present, from craving to sufficiency, from emptiness to fullness. Why? Because the mind that lives in gratitude cannot be conquered by loss. The wealth of enough. Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." Think about that. Poverty isn't measured by the size of your bank account, but by the hunger of your desires. A billionaire who constantly wants more is poor. A man with little who feels content is rich. The Stoics flipped the entire economy of happiness on its head. Wealth isn't having everything. Wealth is wanting less. A modern image. Picture someone scrolling on their phone late at night. Every swipe reveals a life they don't have. A house bigger, a body leaner, a trip more exotic. Their chest tightens. Their mind whispers, "Why not me?" Now picture another person standing in the same room, looking up, not at a screen but at the simple reality around them. The roof that keeps out the rain. The lungs that still draw breath. The friend who sent them a message today. Who is wealthier? The one who sees abundance where they stand. Marcus Aurelius's reminder. Marcus Aurelius, who could command almost anything, wrote this to himself. Do not indulge in dreams of what you have not, but reckon up the chief of the blessings you do possess, and then thankfully remember how you would crave for them if they were not yours. In other words, imagine losing the very things you take for granted. Your sight, your family, the ability to walk. Suddenly, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. Gratitude flips the script. It turns what you already have into treasure. The unseen gift of hardship. Gratitude isn't only for what's pleasant. The Stoics train themselves to feel gratitude even for hardship. Why? Because hardship is the forge of strength. Pain is proof you're alive. Obstacles are opportunities to practice courage, patience, and resilience. Epictetus, who lived much of his life in chains, taught that every difficulty is a chance to say, "This is my training. This is what I came for." Imagine being grateful not just for comfort, but for struggle. That's a form of invincibility. A small practice. Here's a Stoic exercise you can try tonight. When you lay in bed, imagine one simple thing in your life vanishing. Your morning coffee, the ability to hear music, the voice of someone you love. Now open your eyes and realize they are still here. And in that moment, notice how even the ordinary glows with significance. That's not weakness. That's not naivety. That's armor, because a grateful heart cannot be enslaved by longing. Why this matters? When you walk through the world armored with gratitude, every day becomes enough. You're no longer chasing endlessly. You're no longer terrified of loss. Because even if life strips away your wealth, your reputation, your comforts, you still stand rich. Rich in awareness. Rich in the unshakable fact that to be alive at all is already a gift. Bridge to the next lesson. But there's a catch. Gratitude teaches you to value the present. But it doesn't stop the clock. And the clock is always ticking. The Stoics knew, Life is shorter than we think. Which means the only real tragedy isn't losing what you have. It's wasting the little time you've been given. And that's where we go next. The urgency of mortality. Part 5. Memento Mori. The urgency of mortality. Gratitude makes life shine. But the Stoics remind us that light won't last forever. Every sunrise we see is one fewer. Every breath we take brings us closer to our last. This isn't meant to depress you. It's meant to awaken you. The phrase the Stoics lived by was simple: memento mori. Remember, you must die. Why they kept death close. In our world, we hide death. We push it into hospitals, into funeral homes, into whispers. But the Stoics carried it with them every day. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Not tomorrow. Not one day. Right now." By remembering death, they didn't become morbid. They became alive. The illusion of later. How many times have you told yourself, "I'll start tomorrow. I'll reach out later. I'll chase that dream when the timing is right." But here's the truth. There is no later. Later is the most dangerous illusion we believe in. Seneca warned that it is not that we have a short life, but that we waste much of it. It's not the clock that robs us. It's our postponing. The funeral thought experiment. Try this. Imagine yourself at your own funeral. Your body lies still. The people who loved you gather around. Now ask, what do they remember? What did you give them? Did you live as if your time mattered? Or did you spend your life waiting? This isn't fantasy. This moment is coming. And the gap between here and there is smaller than you think. How mortality frees you. First, thinking about death feels heavy. But here's the paradox. Once you accept it, it becomes liberating. If you knew you had only one more year to live, how much nonsense would you stop tolerating? How many grudges would you drop? How quickly would you tell people you love them? How courageously would you finally act? That is the freedom of memento mori. It rips away procrastination. It strips away fear. Because when the worst that can happen is inevitable, what's left to be afraid of? A modern reminder. Every time you check the clock, remember, you're not checking the time of day. You're checking how much of your one life has already been spent. That thought could feel crushing. Or it could feel like a challenge. A dare. Don't waste it. Don't sleepwalk through it. The Stoics chose the second. A small practice. Here's a practice you can try right now. Tonight, before bed, whisper to yourself, if I don't wake tomorrow, would I be content with how I live today? If the answer is no, then tomorrow isn't for routine. It's for change. And if the answer is yes, then you've touched real peace. Why this matters. To live without remembering death is to drift. To live with death on your shoulder is to burn, bright, urgent, alive. Memento mori is not about dying. It's about finally starting to live. Bridge to the next lesson. But there's one more truth the Stoics knew. Even if you remember death, even if you live urgently, life will still wound you. People will betray you. Fortune will turn. Pain will find you. And that's why the next lesson is crucial. How to turn pain into power. Part 6. Pain as teacher, not enemy. The Stoics never promised a painless life. They promised something harder and stronger, that pain could be transformed into power. In their eyes, suffering wasn't an interruption of life. It was life, and what mattered wasn't avoiding it but meeting it well. The natural law of hardship. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Does what happened keep you from acting with justice, generosity, self-control, sanity, prudence, honesty, humility, straightforwardness? If pain doesn't destroy your character, it hasn't destroyed you." The Stoics saw hardship the way a blacksmith sees fire, not as destruction, but as the forge where strength is made. Why we fear pain. Modern life teaches us to run from discomfort. We medicate it, escape it, distract ourselves with noise and screens. But avoidance only multiplies suffering. The wound grows in the dark. The Stoics flipped the question. Instead of, how do I escape this pain? They asked, what is this pain trying to teach me? the lessons hidden in pain. Loss teaches impermanence. Nothing is guaranteed, so treasure what you have. Failure teaches resilience. You learn more from one stumble than from 1,000 easy wins. Betrayal teaches self-reliance. The only approval you truly need is your own. Physical pain teaches presence. Each breath, each sensation, is a reminder. I'm still alive. Pain is a ruthless teacher, yes, but it's the most honest one we have. Seneca's warning. Seneca wrote, "Fire tests gold. Suffering tests brave men. You don't prove your strength when life is gentle. You prove it when life bends you, and you refuse to break." A modern image. Picture two people facing the same hardship. A business collapses, a relationship ends, a diagnosis arrives. One asks, "Why me?" and sinks. The other asks, "What now?" and rises. The event is the same. The difference is perspective. A small practice. Here's a Stoic exercise for the next time pain visits you. Instead of saying, "This shouldn't be happening," try whispering, "This is happening for me." It doesn't erase the hurt, but it transforms you from victim to student, from passive sufferer to active learner. Why this matters? If you can learn to see pain not as an enemy, but as an instructor, then no hardship can ever truly defeat you. Every wound becomes wisdom. Every scar becomes armor. Every setback becomes a step forward. And that's how the Stoics walked through fire and came out unburned. Bridge to the next lesson. But there's still a deeper battlefield ahead. Because pain is one thing. The mind, with its chaos, its storms, its temptations, is another. The Stoics knew, mastery of the mind is mastery of life. And that is where we go next. The discipline of the mind. Part 7. Mastery of the mind. The inner citadel. The Stoics believed the world could strip you of everything. Your wealth, your health, your status, even your loved ones. But there was one fortress no tyrant, no storm, no misfortune could breach. The citadel of your own mind. If you could master this inner stronghold, you became untouchable. The storm outside versus the stillness within. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire in chaos, wars, plague, betrayal. Yet in his meditations he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The Stoics didn't seek control over the world. They sought control over their reactions to it. Because if your peace depends on the outside, you'll always be a slave to chance. But if your peace depends on the inside, you become free always. The enemy within. The Stoics knew the greatest enemy isn't the world. It's the untrained mind. Fear exaggerates dangers. Desire invents needs. Anger burns bridges before you've crossed them. Ego blinds you to truth. Unmastered, the mind becomes a tyrant. Mastered, it becomes a shield. Epictetus, chain-breaking truth. Epictetus, born a slave, taught one of the most liberating truths ever spoken. You may fetter my leg, but not even Zeus himself can overpower my free will. Chains on the body don't matter when the mind refuses to be chained. That is freedom at its purest. Building the inner citadel. So how do you build this fortress of the mind? 1. Daily reflection. Every night. Ask, where did I falter? Where did I stay strong? This turns mistakes into teachers. 2. Voluntary hardship. Practice small discomforts. Cold showers. Fasting. Silence. If you can endure little storms, big ones won't break you. 3. Thought auditing. When anxiety rises, pause and ask, is this within my control or not? If not, release it. 4. Mental rehearsal. Visualize challenges before they arrive. Then, when they do, you'll meet them as familiar visitors. A modern parallel. Think of your mind like a smartphone. If you don't set boundaries, every notification hijacks your focus. But with discipline, you decide what gets in and what stays out. The Stoics were setting "do not disturb" on their minds, long before technology existed. Why this matters? If you can hold stillness when the world shakes, if you can keep clarity when others drown in noise, if you can stay free when others are chained to anger, greed, or fear, Then you've built the inner citadel. And once you live there, nothing can touch you. Bridge to the final lesson. But the Stoics didn't just stop at mastery of the mind. They asked a bigger question. If you've conquered fear, pain, and even death, what will you do with that strength? The final lesson is the ultimate call. Living with purpose as part of something greater than yourself. Part 8. The Stoic Path to Becoming Unstoppable. We've walked through all the laws of the Stoics. Facing death without fear. Surrendering to fate. Turning pain into power. Building the citadel of the mind. But these aren't just private victories. They're preparation. Preparation for the only question that matters. What will you do with your life? Knowing it's short, fragile, and entirely in your hands. The crossroads. Imagine yourself standing at a crossroads. On one side, the path of comfort, distraction, and safety. On the other, the path of courage, service, and meaning. Most choose the first. The Stoic chooses the second. Why? Because they know death is close. Because they know pain is inevitable. Because they know the mind can be free even in chains. So they ask, why waste this brief spark of existence on smallness? The lineage of warriors. You are not the first to walk this path. Behind you stands a lineage of warriors of the mind. Epictetus in slavery, Seneca in exile, Marcus Aurelius in the palace, all choosing virtue over comfort, truth over illusion, duty over ease. And now it's your turn. The final call. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." The Stoics don't ask you to live forever. They ask you to live urgently, to act now, to build, to love, to serve, to stand. Because the clock is always ticking. And the only life you own is the one you are living in this moment. A cinematic closing. So choose. Remain ordinary, swept by the winds of chance. Or become unshakable, a citizen of time itself, a warrior of the mind. The Stoics handed you the laws. They gave you the keys. The fortress is waiting. The path is open. Step forward and become unstoppable.